A recurring question that I get from folks over DMs is whether I think it's worth their hard-earned money to go for a Fender Custom Shop Jazzmaster or Jaguar. And so today we're going to be exploring that topic with this 1959 Journeyman Relic Jazzmaster in gorgeous Faded Fiesta Red. Now, it's always a pleasure when a Fender Custom Shop comes through and ends up on my bench for a setup or modding, because it's not very often that it happens. Not too many folks can afford a Fender Custom Shop, because for sure, this is a premium tier instrument, and the details, once you feel and see one up close, become very apparent very quickly. And time and again, I have been super impressed. This is definitely a cut above your standard American Vintage Reissue, and head and shoulders above any made in Mexico or Squire offset that you're going to be able to get your hands on. As you know, every custom shop Jazzmaster Jaguar is going to have different specs, whether you buy them from a licensed and authorized custom shop Fender dealer such as Dave's Guitar Shop or Wildwood Guitars, or if a client has commissioned the custom shop to build one specifically for them, whether it be a team built custom shop guitar, which involves several members of the custom shop putting together an awesome instrument, or a master built guitar in which one master builder produces the entire instrument from beginning to end. Now, quickly going over the specs, this one has a two-piece alder body with a gorgeous faded Fiesta Red finish. You can see when you look up close that it's got some weather checking and a tasteful amount of wear and vintage patina to it that you are not going to see again on your standard mass-produced models. We've also got a rosewood fretboard with clay dot inlays that look very reminiscent of an actual vintage Jazzmaster from the late 50s to early 60s. A riff sawn maple neck, also finished in a tinted amber nitrocellulose finish. The wear here is very light, very tasteful. I think overall the vibe of this is supposed to be like a closet clean or a closet classic finish, in which a guitar has sat in its case in the closet for over 60 years. And I think they nail that vibe on here. Now, the neck profile on this definitely gets you into the ballpark of an early pre-CBS neck. It is a 1 5/8 inch nut width on this, so a bit slimmer than your modern 1.65 inch nut width. And the overall profile on the back, I'd say, is a thin to medium C, definitely thinner than the current American Vintage 2s, definitely thinner than the big AV65 and American Original 60s neck, and I'd say it's comparable to the neck profile that you would find on the American Vintage 62 Jazzmasters. Now, where it differs from those models is that this one has a 9.5-inch radius, along with what they call 6105 frets, but these look an awful lot like medium jumbos to me. So despite what is printed on the paper, I'm going to go ahead and say these are definitely medium jumbos and not narrow tall frets, because they're a little bit too wide. That said, it feels really fantastic and comfortable in the hand. It doesn't take very much effort to do chording or even lead work on this, and you are not going to be choking out anywhere up the neck because of that slightly flatter modern radius that this has. Now, a couple other vintage appointments you will usually find on a custom shop guitar are some hand wound pickups. These are hand wound in the Fender Custom Shop, so they are unique and don't sound exactly like anything else that you can buy as aftermarket pickups. You've also got your vintage style wiring on here with your cloth covered leads and your CTS pots and switchcraft switches. This one also lists a nitro 4-ply tortoiseshell pick guard. Now, I'm not sure if that means that this one is celluloid. It looks definitely a bit different from the standard tortoiseshell models that you will see on your American Vintage series, but at the same time, it's definitely no Spitfire or Avant-Garde or Lava Guards UK level tort. This one, unlike many others you will also see on the market, does not have the RSD bridge, which is Fender's proprietary premium bridge option that you will see a lot of the time, and instead has one of the vintage threaded saddle bridges. And if we get up close here, you can see that they have aged this very, very accurately to the era, with the saddles almost going black from oxidation and rust. And same goes for the vintage style Fender vibrato here. Now, with regards to the feel of this vibrato, it feels pretty similar, if not spot on the same as modern produced American Vintage reissue units that come on their reissue guitars, as well as the ones that you can buy as aftermarket parts. So I don't think that they're using any kind of special tension spring here or any other special parts. I think the only difference here is that they have aged it so that its patina looks like it could potentially be 60 plus years old. You've also got your standard, I can't tell if these are parchment or age white colored Strat style knobs here. All of the aesthetic details are here, but is that enough to merit the high price tag that a lot of these custom shop Jazzmasters command? Now, if you are lucky, you may find a custom shop Jazzmaster used around the $3,000 mark. And at that price, I do think these are a really good value, especially when compared to the standard production models. You can really feel the attention to detail here. The rolled fingerboard edges, for example, the really impeccable fretwork and nut work that has been done. Again, going back to aesthetics, when you look at this instrument, it's inspiring to look at, right? It does remind you of a vintage Jazzmaster and even feels like a vintage Jazzmaster in a lot of ways. Now, if you are trying to buy one new, expect to see these for around the $5,000 to $6,000 range. That's usually the prices that I will see these for. Obviously, you can also go more expensive by directly commissioning a build, whether that be team built or master built. Those ones sometimes can be upwards of 10, sometimes 12. I've even seen $15,000 on those models, and they usually are very, very unique, very special, sparkle finishes, very, very detailed wear patterns and hardware and pickups and all of that stuff. Now, this does beg the question, how much money is too much money to be spending on a single guitar? And unfortunately, I have never been at the point where I can be dropping $6,000+ on a single guitar. Definitely not unless I sell off a bunch of my other guitars to have that kind of money to put forth. But folks will tell you time and again that the price doesn't matter so long as you can afford it and you get joy and excitement and inspiration out of playing this instrument. And for sure, the attention to detail here, the amount of love and care and the integrity behind the build of this guitar is very, very apparent once you have one in hand. Now, that's not to say spending $6,000+ on a custom shop Jazzmaster is going to ensure that it has absolutely no problems. Unfortunately, rarely I will see folks griping about quality issues on theirs. I recently had a friend tell me a story about a custom shop Jazzmaster that he had bought in the past that did arrive to him with a frozen truss rod. So all of the unfortunate and random things that can happen to a guitar can still potentially happen to a custom shop Jazzmaster. Fortunately, he was able to get his money back. I believe that guitar was used. And so I think that if any such issue were to arise, if you were to order direct from the Fender Custom Shop, I do not doubt that they would take care of it. Now, originally, I was going to make a dedicated video out of this, but I would be remiss if I did not mention or compare whether you should go with a custom shop Jazzmaster or a vintage one, because while the price of vintage has skyrocketed over the past decade or so, these vintage instruments can still be found every now and again to be cheaper than a new or a commissioned custom shop build. So what are the main differences? The guitar that I have here is a 1965 body only refinish, an actual vintage Jazzmaster. It has had a few components switched out, such as the lead control pods, but pretty much everything else here is original. You will notice the dark, almost ebony, like Brazilian rosewood fretboard, which is not something that you are going to commonly see even on a custom shop, but also the feel of the neck here. You can really feel the aged lacquer, however nuanced it may be. The gloss finish on the custom shop just feels more new, despite the fact that they tried to emulate a 60-year-old finish. And the wood used here is actually 60 years old. So that means that the guitar overall is quite a bit lighter than the custom shop, which I weighed in right around probably like 8.1 to 8.2 pounds, whereas this is around the 7.6 pound mark. And I always appreciate a lighter guitar, especially when it comes to offset guitars. A few other things that I feel vintage has the advantage over a custom shop is the pickups. The hand wound pickups on the custom shop undoubtedly sound very nice, but I feel like no modern reproductions can really nail the open, airy, almost bordering on microphonic, sweet tone that a pair of vintage Jazzmaster pickups has. Now, I'm not sure if that is because the magnets have kind of aged, demagnetized over time, or if it has to do with the coil or the actual wire used there. Even modern reproductions, such as the beloved Seymour Duncan Antiquity 1s and 2s, that do have a demagnetization process, can't really quite nail this tone spot on. And I mentioned this before, but guys, vintage Tort is just the GOAT. You can just see a level of detail here, just the swirly, blurry patterns of real vintage celluloid Tort. It's inspiring for me to see every time I see this guitar out, and I rarely put this thing in its case because every time I see it, I just want to pick it up and play it. And undoubtedly, if we had a vintage style celluloid Tort on the custom shop Jazzmaster, it would nail that vibe that much closer. Now, a couple of advantages a custom shop Jazzmaster has over vintage is one, obviously, if you're commissioning one, you are going to be getting exactly what you want, right? You are not compromising at all on the aesthetics, whether that be the color, the amount of wear. You're not compromising on the neck profile, which can vary dramatically on vintage examples, even ones produced in the same year. So you can specify all of that, especially if you are commissioning a build. Another thing that is an advantage here is that these parts, while aged to look old in operation, still feel brand new. A good example of that is these vintage style tuners. These are like Kluson style tuners. The 1965 Jazzmaster that I showed you has actual 1965 produced Kluson double line tuners. And I'm not going to lie, they feel a bit janky now, right? It's been 60 60 years. And so some of those tuners are a little bit hard to turn. If you buy vintage, sometimes some of those tuners can be bent. But on this, you're not going to have that issue. Another thing is that you're not going to have the issue of like potentially getting a guitar that has insane fret wear. If you are buying one of these used, likely it was produced in the past decade, maybe 2 decades. And so the wear that you are going to potentially get is not going to be the same as on a 60-year-old guitar that may have had several owners over the past 6 decades, and maybe is a guitar that is going to need a full refret pretty soon. So, do I think one of these Journeyman Custom Shop Jazzmasters is worth it? Obviously, if money is no object to you, go ahead, knock yourself out, build your dream guitar. I can see that being a very, very exciting prospect. If you find one on the used market around that $3,000 mark, and you have been in the market for a Jazzmaster, maybe thinking about buying an American Vintage 2 Jazzmaster, I would definitely spring for, so long as you are into the specs of the one that you find. And again, pay attention closely to the neck profile, to the size of the frets, to the radius, to the kind of hardware that is installed on the ones that you will find on the used market, because again, they will vary dramatically from piece to piece sometimes. So make sure it is something that you actually want and don't just buy all willy-nilly. But if you find one that is what you want in the 3,000, maybe even up to $3,500 range, you are going to feel a pretty significant difference in quality, even over their American Vintage Reissue line. That, and also if you buy used, you can most likely expect to be able to at least get within the ballpark of getting most of your money back should you have to sell. Whereas if you commission a build, oh man, it's tough out there, folks. Expect to be, losing probably at least 40, maybe even up to 50% of what you put into that guitar, because it's just tough to sell very, very expensive guitars these days. Anyway, I think that about does it for this video. I hope it's been helpful, especially if you've been on the market for a custom shop or maybe even vintage Jazzmaster. What do you all think? Are any of you happy and content custom shop Jazzmaster owners? Have you had any issues come up with your custom shop and how were they dealt with? And also, how much did you pay for yours? And is there a difference to you between custom shops that you found in store and the custom shops that you yourself have commissioned? Definitely let me know down in the comments. I would love to hear it. As always, if you haven't already, please hit that like and subscribe button as well as the notification bell to be notified of new videos as soon as they drop. And don't forget to follow Totally Wired Guitars for more offset guitars buying tips.